Hello, Seawolf here. Number 19. Which RPG has the best writing? Although that's a bad question for me because I only read what I need to know. I commonly skip over fluff text and flavor text unless I'm seeking some kind of inspiration. I only have so much time in my life, and it takes me a long time to read anything. And not that I'm not anti-reading. I read all the time as much as I can, but I read really slow, and I don't retain what I read all the time. I don't know if that comes down to something in my past or whatever, but there is one role-playing game that I could not put down because of the writing, and I kept on finding amazing stories in them and amazing inspiration. At least they were amazing to me. And that role-playing game is Fading Suns, put out by Holistic Design back in the 90s. It has gone through several different iterations. I believe they're on the second edition revised, whatever that means. And there was also a D20 version. I ran that. I ran both the original system, which was called Victory Point System, and D20. Had issues with the Victory Point system. Did not like it. Players described it as anti-player. It is just a boring and just not a fun game to play, or a system to play. And so I think that's what's hampered its popularity. I think that if people would just take a moment and look at it, they would see a rich universe. And maybe that's also, it's so rich and so in depth and so robust that it scares people away, much like Forgotten Realms scares me away. But it had me at the get-go. It had the art drew me in, and then just the visuals, and then the story was amazing. The Victory Point system, to go back to that, was kind of a strange system for people. It was a roll D20 and get under your skill plus attribute, and your critical hit is equal to your attribute. So they called it a blackjack system. Get equal to, but not over, the value. And that any kind of roll under system, no matter how gimmicky you make it, it's just not fun in the modern day. It is not. It's not heroic. It's not. There has to be some other. And I think Holistic Design has kind of tied the license to that blackjack system, and that's a sad thing, because the setting alone would sell under another system so well. Like, what I might say, who knows, maybe Savage Worlds? Absolutely, 100%. D20 was broke. It was broke. Although Victory Point system wasn't broke, it was still boring to play. D20 was broken, and it suffered the same problems it had in Star Wars D20, that the magic users or the supernatural users were just out of balance. And it just wasn't play tested well enough. Trust me, I play tested. I ran a year and a half's worth of a campaign. We had a lot of fun up until the end. The end was just, because they'd gotten so high level, it was just completely out of balance. I couldn't beat them no matter what. So to get into the setting, which is what I love the most, I like to describe it as Dune, Frank Herbert's Dune, meets Lovecraftian horror meets a little bit of Stargate. All elements I love. It has 3 factions that rule the universe. It's set in the 51st century after many iterations of the human empires. First 2 were republics. The Second Republic was much like the Federation in Star Trek, in that it was a utopia and technology was ruling the day, and it was, the whole society was dependent on the technology they were producing, until it collapsed. And out of the ashes of that came noble houses, a fanatical church, and the merchant guilds. And they fought to build an empire. When an emperor was crowned and then subsequently assassinated before he could wear his crown too long, another war followed, the Emperor War, and after realizing that it was getting too terrible, they all agreed, so many words, on a particular emperor, through deceit, through intrigue. I mean, this game is full of intrigue, and it's one of my favorite elements of the game. In a setting, in a story. And so now you have noble houses. There are 6 major noble houses, if I remember right. 5 or 6. 5 or 6 sub-factions of the church, and 5 or 6 major guilds. One of those major guilds controls space travel, like in Dune. Space travel is through these ancient gates that were found early on, and it's the only way to travel. These ancient gates allow them to go from one system to another. One was discovered in our solar system, and eventually they figured out how to work it as if they were left there intentionally, creating a web of connections between systems, and that's how the empires grew. But now the gates are controlled by charioteers, which are a guild. I love the intrigue. I love there's 2 aspects I love the most about this system, or this setting. One is it's grounded in history, and the history it's grounded in is the Dark Ages and medieval times, and it truly says, basically, if you don't learn from history, it's going to repeat. And it's funny we're saying that now in this time, in this day and age, what's going on right now, it's the truth. And so you've got the emperor, which is kind of the king of the empire, much like what was going on in the medieval times. And you have the church, which is another aspect I love. I'll get into that in just a minute. And you also have barbarians at the gate, which are lost colonies that have just gone barbaric. And they're based on the Danes and the Islamic State during the Crusades. There's a lot of Crusade parallels in this setting. So I just love the history, how grounded in history it is. On top of that, a lot of science fiction in its timelines, etc., just completely ignores religion and faith. And I find that sad, to be quite honest with you. If you look at history, human history, there are very few aspects of our being that motivates us more than our faith. Motivates us to do good things and motivates us to do bad things. I don't say faith is perfect, but it is an important aspect of humanity, and no matter how hard you get rid of it, you try your best to get rid of it, it is not going to go away. It's not going to be ignored. Faith will drive humanity, among other things. Money, to greed, absolutely, and that's part of this setting as well. The drive to spread out, explore, curiosity, that's another one. But faith, and so the church is one aspect that it models itself after the Catholic Church of the Crusades, and it has its own. It's starting to go through its reformation, but that's right now treated as heresy. They control technology because of the Second Republic. They saw its fall was due to its hubris and its dependency on technology. So certain technologies are prescribed, while other technologies are only allowed for the nobles because they're blessed, or only allowed for the guilds, because there are engineers, and so they're always trying to push the envelope, but the guilds are, and the church is always kind of watching over them. So there's this dichotomy between all three factions, and because it's been so long since the Second Republic, there's lost technology out there. There's massive terraforming engines that people have forgotten and are either breaking down and destroying colonies or now worshipped by. It's just examples, So both those aspects are amazing to me and so inspiring. I love digging into it. It's got elements of fantasy. It has supernatural in it. It's kind of got a Lovecraftian magic to it. Another favorite aspect of it is because travel is through gates and there's no faster light engines. There is what they call the darkness between the stars. Love that kind of statement. And it's basically anything beyond the gates is considered the darkness between the stars, and no one knows what dwells within. And there's talk of demons, krakens, space krakens, which is awesome. I love that kind of crap. Oh, and a big aspect of the game, and it's kind of the motivation behind the church. I shouldn't leave it out. Is also the title of the game. At one point, people noticed that the stars are fading. Stars are just vanishing. Not at a high rate, but over long periods of time, stars just fade. And so it's an amazing setting, and I highly recommend it. I hope they put it out in Savage Worlds. That's about it for today. I'll get into tomorrow's pretty soon. I may have to record that ahead of time, so I may be wearing the same shirt. Until then, thanks, and seek the wolf in thyself.